Okay, chapter 23. A shiver ran down Coriolanus' spine, and he could sense the rest of the recruits stirring. Run, run, they'll run! The cry built and then seemed to engulf him, bouncing off the trees and attacking him from behind. For a moment he thought he'd gone mad. He disobeyed orders and whipped his head around, almost expecting to see an army of Arlos breaking through the teeming woods behind him. Nothing, no one. Then the voice came again from a branch a few feet above him. Run, run, little run! At the sight of the small black bird, he flashed back to Dr. Gall's lab where he'd seen the same creatures. Perch at the top of a cage, jabberjays. Why, the woods must be full of these things, mimicking Arlo's death cry as they had run the wails of the Abax's lab. Run, 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 little run, 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 little run. As Coriolanus turned back to attention, he could see the disruption of the birds had caused in the back row of the recruits. Although the rest of the peacekeepers stood unaffected, used to it by now, Coriolanus thought. He was not sure he'd ever be used to the refrain of somebody's death cry. Even now it was transforming, changing from Arlo's speech into something almost melodic, a string of notes that mirrored the inflection of his voice, somehow more haunting than the words had been. Out in the crowd, the peacekeepers had the woman Lil and were carrying her away. She gave one last wail of despair, and the birds picked that up as well, first as a voice and then as part of the arrangement. Human speech had vanished, and what remained was a musical chorus of Arlo and Lil's exchange. Mockingjays grumbled a soldier in front of him, stinking nuts. Coriolanus remembered talking to Lucy Gray before the interview. Well, you know what they say, the show's not over until the Mockingjay sings. The Mockingjay? Really? I think you're just making these things up. Not that one. The Mockingjay is a bona fide bird. And it sings in your show? Not my show, sweetheart. Yours, the Capitol's anyway. This must be what she meant. The Capitol show was the hanging. The Mockingjay is some sort of bona fide bird, not a jabberjay. Different somehow. Regional thing, he supposed, but that was strange because the soldiers had called him mutts. His eyes strained to dry and isolate one in the foliage. Now that he knew what he was looking for, he found several jabberjays. Perhaps the mockingjays were identical, but no, wait there. A little higher up, a blackbird, slightly larger than the jabberjay, suddenly opened its wings to reveal two patches of dazzling white as it leafed its beak in song. Coriolanus felt sure he'd spotted his first mockingjay, and he disliked the thing on sight. The bird song unsettled the audience, and whispers turned to mutters, which turned to objections, as the peacekeeper shoved Lil into the van that had brought Arlo. Coriolanus felt afraid of this mob's potential. Were they about to turn on the soldiers? Unbidden, he felt his thumb release the safety of his gun. A volley of bullets made him jump, and he looked for the bleeding bodies, but he only saw one of the officers lowering his gun. The officer laughed and nodded to the commander, having just fired into the trees and caused a flock of birds to take flight. Among them, Coriolanus made out dozens of pairs of flashing black and white wings. The gunfire subdued the crowd, and he could see the peacekeepers waving that at them, shouting, "Back to work, show's over." As the field emptied, he continued to stand at attention, hoping no one had noticed his jumpiness. When they all piled onto the truck to head back to the base, the major said, "I should have warned you about the birds." "What are they, exactly?" asked Coriolanus. The major snorted. "A mistake, if you ask me." "A mutation?" Coriolanus persisted. "Kind of." "Well, it's them and their offspring," the major said. "After the war, the capital let all the jabberjay mutts loose to die out, and they should have too, all being male. But they had an eye for the local mockingbirds, and the birds seemed willing enough. Now we've got these mockingjay freaks to deal with. In a few years, all the jabberjays will be gone, and we'll see if new ones can mate with one another." Coriolanus did not want to spend the next 20 years listening to them serenade the local executions. Perhaps if he ever did become an officer, he could organize a hunting party to clear the woods of them. But why wait? Why not suggest it for now for the recruits as a form of target practice? Surely no one liked the birds. The idea made him feel better. He turned to Sejanus to tell him of his plan, but Sejanus' face was as gloomy as it had been in the capital. "What's wrong?" Sejanus kept his eyes on his wood as the truck pulled out. "I really didn't think this through." "What do you mean?" said Coriolanus, but Sejanus only shook his head. Back on base, they returned their guns and were unexpectedly free until supper at 5. As soon as they changed back into the fatigues, Sejanus mumbled something about writing to Ma and disappeared. Coriolanus found a letter one of his bunkmates must have picked up for him. He recognized the fine, spidery hand of Pluribus Bell and boosted himself up on his bed to read it. Much of it confirmed what Tigris had already told him, that Pluribus was at the Snow service, both selling their goods and offering temporary lodgings while they figured out their situation. But one paragraph jumped out at Coriolanus. "I'm so sorry about how this all worked out for you. Casca Highbottom's punishment seemed excessive, and it started me wondering. I think I mentioned that he and your father were as thick as thieves when they were in university, but I do remember towards the end a row of sorts. Very uncharacteristic of them. Casca was furious, saying he'd been drunk and the whole thing was meant to be a joke. And your father had said he should be grateful, that he'd been doing him a favor. Your father left, but Casca stayed drinking until I closed. I asked him what was wrong, but all he would say was, like moths to a flame. He was quite drunk. I suppose they patched it up eventually, but maybe not. They both went on to the job soon after, and I didn't see them much. People move on." The snatch of story provided the closest explanation Coriolanus had got yet for Dean Highbottom hating him. A row of falling out? He knew it hadn't been patched up unless another had succeeded it, because of the bitter way the dean had spoken about his father. What a petty little man Dean Highbottom was, still nursing his wounds over some disagreement at school, even now when his imagined persecutor was long dead. Let it go, can't you? He thought. How can it be still of consequence? At dinner, Smiley, Beanpole, and Bug wanted to hear all about the hanging, and Coriolanus tried his best to satisfy them. His idea of using mockingbaits for target practice was met with enthusiasm, and his bunkmates encouraged him to pitch it up to the higher-ups. The only damper was Sejanus, who sat silent and withdrawn, pushing his tray of noodles out for public consumption. Coriolanus felt a twinge of concern. The last time Sejanus had lost his appetite, he lost his sanity as well. Later, as they mopped the mess hall, Coriolanus cornered him. What's bothering you? Don't say nothing. Sejanus lost his mop around the bucket of grey water. I don't know. I keep wondering what would happen today if the crowd had gotten physical. Would we have to shoot them? Probably not, said Coriolanus, though he was wondering the same thing. Probably just fire a few rounds in the air. If I'm helping to kill people in the districts, how is it better than helping to kill them in the Hunger Games? Asked Sejanus. Coriolanus' instincts had been right. Sejanus was sliding into another ethical quagmire. What did you think it was going to be? I mean, what did you think we signed up for? I thought I could be a medic, confessed Sejanus. A medic, Coriolanus repeated, like a doctor? No, that would require university training, Sejanus explained. Something more basic. Something where I could help anyone who'd been injured. Capital or district violence breaks out. At least I wouldn't do any harm. I just don't know if I could ever kill anyone, Corio. Coriolanus felt a stab of annoyance. Had Sejanus forgotten that it was his own reckless behavior that had led to Coriolanus killing Bobbin? That his selfishness had robbed his friend of the luxury of such a statement? Then he suppressed a laugh at the thought of old Strabo Plinth, a munitions giant with a pacifist air. He could imagine the conversation that had transpired between father and son. What a waste, he thought. What a waste of that dynasty. What about in a war? He asked Sejanus. You're a soldier, you know. I know. A war would be different, I guess, said Sejanus, but I would have to be fighting for something I believed in. I would have to believe it would make the world a better place. I'd still rather be a medic. But there isn't much demand for them at the moment. It turns out without war, they've got a long waiting list of people who'd like to be trained to work at the clinic, but even for that, you need a recommendation, and the sergeant doesn't want to give you one. Why not? Sounds like a perfect fit, said Coriolanus. Because I'm too good with the guns, James told him. It's true, I'm a crack shot. My father taught me from when I was tiny, and every week I had mandatory target practice. He considers it part of the family business. Coriolanus tried to process the information. Why didn't you hide it? I thought I was. In reality, I shoot much better than I do in training. I try not to stand out, but the rest of the squad's terrible. Sejanus caught himself. Not you. Yes, me, Coriolanus laughed. Look, I think you're making too much of this. It's not like we're having a hanging every day, and if ever it did come to it, just shoot to miss. But the words only fueled Sejanus, and what if that means you, or Beanpole, or Smiley end up dead because I didn't protect you? Oh, Sejanus, Coriolanus burst out in exasperation. You have to stop overthinking everything. Imagine every worst-case scenario. This isn't going to happen. We're all going to die right here, of old age or excessive mopping. Whatever takes us first. In the meantime, quit hitting the target, or invent a problem with your eyes, or smash your hand in the door. Stop being so self-indulgent, in other words, said Sejanus. Well, it's so dramatic anyway. That's how you ended up in the arena, remember? Asked Coriolanus. Sejanus reacted as if Coriolanus had slapped him. After a moment, though, he nodded in recognition. That's how I almost got us both killed. You're right, Corio. Thanks. I'm going to think over what you said. A thunderstorm ushered in Saturday, and leaving behind a thick layer of mud and air so heavy, Coriolanus felt he could wring it out like a sponge. He'd begun to crave the salty food Cookie favored and cleaned his plate at every meal. The effects of the daily training on his body left him stronger, more flexible, and confident. He'd be a match for the locals, even if they spent the day mining. Not that the hand-to-hand combat seemed likely, not with the Peacekeeper's arsenal, but he'd be ready if it happened. During target practice, he kept one eye on Sejanus, whose aim seemed a bit off. Good. Sudden reduction in skills would draw attention. Another boy's estimation of his talent might be suspect, but he'd never known Sejanus to brag. If he said he was a crack shot, no doubt he was, which meant he'd be a real asset in the Mockingjay slider if he could be persuaded to try. At the end of practice, Coriolanus pitched the idea to the sergeant and felt gratified by his answer. That might not be a bad idea. Kill two birds with one stone. Oh, I hope more than two, Coriolanus joked, and the sergeant rewarded him with a grunt. After a sweltering afternoon of laundry, shoveling fatigues in and out of the industrial wash machines, and drying, sorting, and folding, Coriolanus bolted down dinner and made for the showers. Was it his imagination, or had his beard filled in? He admired it, and he scraped a razor over his face. Another sign that he was leaving boyhood behind. He towel-dried his hair, relieved that his buzz had become less severe. Here and there he could coax a bit of wave. The promise of a band at the Hob that night filled the bathroom with excitement. Apparently none of the recruits had followed this year's Hunger Games. Some girl gonna be there singing. Yeah, from the capital. No, not from the capital. She went there for the Hunger Games. Oh, guess she won. Their faces shining with heat and scrub, and Coriolanus and his bunkmates headed out into the evening. The guard on duty told them to keep their heads up as they left the base. I guess the five of us could take on some miners, said Beanpole, glancing around. Hand to hand, sure, said Smiley, but what if they have guns? Nah, they can't have guns there, can they, at Beanpole? Not legally, but there's going to be some of them floating around after the war. hidden under floorboards and in trees and something. You can get anything if you have money, Smiley said with a knowing nod. Which clearly none of them do, said Sejanus. Being off the base on foot made Coriolanus edgy too, but he put it down to the mess of emotions he was experiencing. He was, by turns, thrilled, terrified, cocksure, and made badly insecure about seeing Lucy Gray. There were so many things he wanted to say to her, so many questions to ask, he didn't know where to begin. Maybe with just another of those long, slow kisses. After about 20 minutes, they arrived at the Hob, a warehouse for coal in better days. Reduced production had left it abandoned. Probably someone in the capital owned it, if not the capital itself, but no oversight or upkeep was apparent. Along the walls, a few makeshift stalls displayed odds and ends, much of them second-hand. Among the offerings, Coriolanus saw everything from candle stubs to dead rabbits, homemade woven sandals to cracked eyeglasses. He worried that in the wake of the hanging they would be treated with hostility, but no one seemed to give them a second glance. Much of the clientele had come from the base. Smiley, who had been wheeled and dealed at the black market back home, strategically sacrificed one cookie to sampling, breaking into a dozen pieces and allowing taste to people he deemed likely buyers. Ma's magic hit home, and between direct trade with the bootleggers and money from other interested parties, they end up in possession of a bottle of clear liquid so potent the smell made their eyes water. That's good stuff, Smiley promised. They call it white liquor here, but it's your basic moonshine. They each took one swig, provoking a round of coughing and backslapping, and saved the rest for the show. Still in possession of a half-dozen popcorn balls, Coriolanus asked about tickets, but people waved them off. They don't take their pay till after, said one man. Better get a seat if you want a good one, expecting the crowd. The girl's back. Getting in seat involved grabbing an old crate, spool, or plastic bucket from a pile in the corner and staking a spot where you could see the stage, which was no more than an arrangement of wooden pallets at one end of the hob. Coriolanus chose one against the wall about halfway back in the dusky light. Lucy Gray would be hard-pressed to notice him, and he wanted that. He needed time to decide how to approach her. Had she heard he was here, likely not, for who would have told her? Around the base he was merely gent, and his exploit in the Hunger Games caused no mention. Nightfall came, and someone flipped the switch, kicking on a hodgepodge of lights strung together by an ancient cable and several suspicious-looking extension cords. Coriolanus looked for the nearest exit in anticipation of the inevitable fire. With the old wooden structure, the coal dust, a stray spark could turn it into an inferno in a flash. The hob began to fill with a mix of peacekeepers and locals, mostly men, with a fair number of women as well. There must have been close to 200 assembled in all, when a skinny boy of about 12 in a hat adorned with colorful feathers came out and set up a single microphone on the stage, running a cord to the back box at the side. He dragged a wooden crate behind the mic and retreated to an area blocked with a raggedy blanket. His appearance had set off something in the crowd, and people began to clap in unison in a manner that proved contagious. Even Coriolanus found his hands joining in. Voices called for the show to begin, and just when it seemed they never would, the side of the blanket flipped back, and out stepped a little girl in a pink swirl of a dress. She gave a curtsy. The audience cheered as the girl began to beat on a drum that hung from a strap around her neck to dance her way to the microphone. "Ooh, Maud Ivory," hooted a peacekeeper near Coriolanus, and he knew that this was the cousin Lucy Gray had mentioned, the one who could remember every song she heard. It was a big claim for such a young thing. She couldn't be more than 8 or 9. She hopped up on the box, sat beside the microphone, and gave the audience a wave. "Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight." "Is it hot enough for you?" she said in a sweet, squeaky voice, and the crowd laughed. "Well, we're planning on heating things up slightly more. My name's Maud Ivory, and I'm pleased to introduce the Covey." The crowd applauded, and she bobbed curtsies until they quieted enough for her to start the introductions. On mandolin, Tam Amber, a tall, raw-boned young man in a feathered hat, came from behind the curtain, strumming an instrument similar to a guitar, but with a body more like a teardrop. He walked straight to Maud Ivory's side, not acknowledging the audience in any way, his fingers moving easily over the strings. Next, the boy who set up the microphone appeared with a violin. "That's Clerk Carmine on fiddle," announced Maud Ivory, as he played his way across the stage, "and Barbazor on the bass," holding out an instrument that looked like a huge version of a fiddle. A willowy young woman in an ankle-length checkered blue dress gave the crowd a shy wave as she joined the others. And now, fresh from their engagement in the Capitol, the one and only Lucy Gray Baird. Coriolanus held his breath as she spun onto the stage, guitar in hand, the ruffles of her acid green dress flaring out around her, her features brightened with makeup. The crowd rose to her feet. She ran lightly over to Tam Amber, scooted Maud Ivory's box back, and took center stage before the mic. "Hey there, District 12, did you miss me?" She grinned as they roared in response. "I bet you never expected to lay eyes on me again," and they go both ways, but I'm back. I sure am back. Encouraged by his mates, a peacekeeper sheepishly approached the stage and handed her a half-filled bottle of white liquor. "Well, what's this? Is that for me?" she asked, receiving the bottle. The peacekeeper made a gesture indicating it was from the group. "Now, you all know I stopped drinking when I was 12. A big laugh came from the audience. "What I did? Of course, there's no harm in having some on hand for medicinal purposes. Thank you kindly. I appreciate it." She considered the bottle, then shot the audience a knowing look and took a swig. "To clear my pipe," she said innocently in response to the howls. "You know, as bad as you treat me, I don't know why I keep coming back, but I do. Reminds me of that old song." Lucy Gray straightened her guitar once and looked around at the rest of the covey, who were gathered in a close half circle around the mic. "Okay, pretty birds, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3. The music began, bright and upbeat. Coriolanus felt his heel tapping out the beat even before Lucy Gray leaned to the mic. My heart's stupid, and that's not maybe. Can't blame Cupid, he's just a baby. Shoot it, boot it, execute it. Still comes a crawling to you who. Heart's gone funny and won't hear reason. You're like honey, you bring the bees in. Sting it, ring it, give it, fling it. Still comes a crawling to you. I wish it mattered that you chose to smash up. How come you shattered that thing I loved with? Did you feel flattered that you could just trash it up? That's why you battered that thing I would love with? Lucy Gray relinquished the mic, allowing Clerk Carmine to step up and do some fancy fingerwork on his fiddle, embellishing the melody while the others backed him up. Coriolanus could take his eyes off Lucy Gray's face, lit up like he'd never seen it before. That's her when she's happy, he thought. She's beautiful. Beautiful in a way, and you could see him, not just him. That could be a problem. Jealousy pricked his heart, but no, she was his girl, wasn't she? He remembered the song she sung in the interview about the guy who'd broken her heart and examined the copy for a low-grade suspect. There was only Tam Amber with the mandolin, but there were no sparks flying between them. One of the locals, maybe? The crowd applauded. Clerk Carmine and Lucy Gray took over again. Trap my ticker, but you haven't freed it. People snicker at how you treat it. Snare it, tear it, strip it, bear it. Still comes a crawling to you who. Heart's been jumping just like a rabbit. Blood keeps pumping, but that's just a habit. Drain it, paint it, I'm insane it. Still it comes a crawling to you. Burn it, spurn it, don't return it. Break it, bake it, overtake it, wreck it, deck it, with the heck it. Still comes a crawling to you. After the applause and fair amount of hollering, the audience settled down to listen some more. As Coriolanus knew from helping Lucy Gray rehearse in the Capitol, Covey had a wide and varied repertoire, played straight instrumental numbers as well. At some time, some of the members would exit, disappearing behind the blanket to leave the stage a pair or solo performer. Tam Amber proved something of a standout on his mandolin, riveting the crowd with his lightning-fast fingering, while his face remained expressionless and distant. Maud Ivory, a crowd favorite, piped out a dark, funny song about a miner's daughter who drowned, and invited the audience members to join in the chorus, which surprisingly many of them did. Or maybe it wasn't surprising, given that most of them were drunk now. Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling, Clementine, you're lost and gone forever, dreadful. Sorry, Clementine. Some of the numbers bordered on unintelligible with an unfamiliar words that Coriolanus struggled to get to the gist of, and he remembered Lucy Gray saying that they were from another time. During these in particular, the five Coveys seemed to turn in on themselves, swaying and building complicating harmonies with their voices. Coriolanus didn't care for it, the sound unsettled him. He sat through at least 3 songs this kind before he realized it reminded him of Mockingjays. Fortunately, most of the songs were newer and more to his liking, and they finished up the one he recognized from Reaping. No, sir, nothing you can take from me is worth dirt. Take it, because I'd give it free. It won't hurt. Nothing you can take from me was worth keeping. The irony of which was not lost on the audience. The Capitol had tried to take everything from Lucy Gray, and it had utterly failed. When the applause died out, she gave Maud Ivory a nod. The girl ran behind the blanket and appeared carrying a basket woven with cheerful ribbons. Thank you kindly, said Lucy Gray. Now, all you know how this works. We don't charge for tickets because sometimes hungry people need music the most. But we get hungry too, so if you'd like to contribute, Maud Ivory will be around with the basket. We thank you in advance. The 4 old Covey spotted and played. Covey softly played while Maud Ivory scampered around the crowd collecting coins in a basket. Between the 5 of them, Coriolanus and his bunkmates only had a few coins, which didn't seem nearly enough, though Maud Ivory thanked them with polite courtesy. Hold on, said Coriolanus. Do you like sweets? He lifted a flap of brown paper package with the last of the popcorn bowl so Maud Ivory could take a peek, and her eyes widened with delight. Coriolanus set them all in the basket as they'd been earmarked for the tickets anyway. If he knew Ma, more boxes were on their way. Maud Ivory did a little pirouette in thanks, hurried through the rest of the audience, and then ran up on the stage to tug on Lucy Gray's skirt, showing her treats in the basket. Coriolanus could see Lucy Gray's lips make an ooh sound and ask where they'd come from. He knew this was the moment, and he found himself taking a step out of the shadows. His body tingled in anticipation as Maud Ivory lifted her hand to point him out. What would Lucy Gray do? Would she acknowledge him, ignore him? Would she even recognize him, made out over as a peacekeeper? Her eyes followed Maud Ivory's finger until they landed on him. A look of confusion crossed her face, then recognition, and then joy. She shook her head in disbelief and laughed. Okay, everybody, this is maybe the best night of my life. Thanks to everybody here who showed up. How about one more song to send you off to sleep? You might have heard me do this before, but it took on a whole new meaning for me in the Capitol. Guess you'll figure out why. Coriolanus moved back to his seat. She knew where to find him now, to listen and to savor their actual reunion, which was only a song away. His eyes teared up when she began the song from the zoo. Down the valley, valley so low, late in the evening, hear the train blow. The train love, hear the train blow. Late in the evening, hear the train blow. Coriolanus felt an elbow nudge his ribs and looked over to see Sejanus beaming at him. It was nice, after all, to have someone else who knew the significance of the song, someone who knew what they had been through. Go build me a mansion, build it so high, so I can see my true love go by. See him go by, so I can see my true love go by. That's me, Coriolanus wanted to tell people around him. I'm her true love, and I saved her life. Go write me a letter, send it in my mail, bake it and stamp it to Capitol Jail. Capitol Jail loves to Capitol Jail. Bake it and stamp it to Capitol Jail. Should you say hello or first, or just kiss her? Roses are red, violets are blue, birds in the heaven know I love you. Kiss her, definitely, just kiss her. No, I love you. Oh, no, I love you. Birds in the heaven. No, I love you. Good night, everybody. Hope to see you next week. And until then, keep singing your song, said Lucy Gray. And the whole covey took one final bow. As the audience applauded, she smiled at Coriolanus. He began to move towards her, stepping around people collecting the makeshift seats to pile back in the corner. A few of the peacekeepers had gathered around her and she chatted with them, but he could see her eyes darting his way. He paused to give her time to extricate herself and just go back into the sight of her, glowing in and loving with him. The peacekeepers were bidding her good night, starting to back away. Coriolanus smoothed his hair and moved in. They were only about 15 apart when a disturbance in the hob, the sound of glass breaking and voices protesting, caused him to turn his head. A dark-haired young man around his age, dressed in a sleeveless shirt and pants ripped at his knees, pushed through the thinning crowd. His face gleamed with sweat, and his movement suggested he had exceeded his weight limit some time ago. Over one shoulder hung a boxy instrument with a part of a piano keyboard along one side. Behind him trailed the mayor's daughter, Mayfair, taking care not to brush against the patrons, her mouth tight with disdain. Coriolanus shifted his gaze to the stage where a cold, fixed stare had replaced Lucy Gray's eager expression. The other members of the band drew it around her protectively, and their showtime levity draining away in the mix of raw anger and sadness. It's him, Coriolanus thought with dead certainty, his stomach twisting unpleasantly. It's the lover from the song.